Hello, everyone. Welcome to class. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Very good. So I see it's just about 4. I was able to review all the drafts. I reviewed about 20, and my assistant reviewed about 10. All of them were reviewed, and we emailed 1 or 2 members in your group the feedback. So check your emails. At least one person, most of the time 2 people, have the feedback. That way you can share it with everyone. You can share it in your Google Docs, or you can email it forward to the rest of the group. So again, all of them have been reviewed, and my assistant sent 10 this morning before 12, and I sent 20 before 2 p.m. today. There was only one that I didn't send through an email, was the one for Christian Miranda. I don't know if Christian Miranda is here, but whoever is in the group of Christian Miranda, the feedback was sent using the Canvas communication system. So if you're in the group of Christian Miranda, it's inside. It's Canvas. By any chance, is Christian Miranda here? Anyone from his group is here? Anyone from the group of Christian Miranda? There was no name on that copy. It was a draft with no names. And so that's why I believe it was Christian Miranda, because I received it from Christian Miranda. So anyone recognize this name, Christian Miranda? So I'm just going to send a message in the chat. Okay. Excellent. Do you have any questions before we start?
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
The draft, is it graded? Like, is it a part of our grade, or is it just to get feedback?
Just to get feedback.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Professor.
So yes, it's not gonna. So you know, there were different amount of the drafts were different amounts. There were some that were very complete, and some that were not so complete. So there was a big variation between the drafts. The good news is all the drafts were written in such a way that there was nobody that was absolutely lost. Usually I have 2 or 3 lost group. This time there was none. However, there was probably 70% of the group that selected to essentially just work on the SWOT. And there was 30% that did more than the SWOT. So, you know, it would have been great to have more people doing more than the SWOT, but there was, yes, 70% that really did the SWOT. Now, looking at the SWOT, what's sort of common is the opportunities were not super strong. That was the weakest part. That's common because that's the hardest thing in business, is identify great opportunities. That's what every business is trying to do. And that's what these people are trying to do. And that's what you're trying to do for them. So that was the weakest part. Having done this for more than 25 years, I know that it's very common 1 month before the paper is due, that it's still not perfect. And I'm always surprised how good it becomes at the end. There is the world is changing, and I've had a lot of people use Chat GPT for writing these reports. It won't work. Chat GPT works for many different things. Maybe Chat GPT can give you some feedback and maybe give you some evaluation of what you're writing. I think that's possible, but it's not so useful because you have to really think about the clients. You have to look at the client's feedback, think again about the interviews and all this, and look at what their competitors are doing. So it's very important that you see that this cannot be done unless you're doing it yourself. Another thing that's very important is to communicate with your team member. So the good news, at least for me, I feel great because I know that among all the answers and all the work that I've already seen that you've completed, the client's going to be very happy because there are quite a lot of solutions. What's sort of confusing is the fact that there are 3 companies, that one of the key problem and is the fact that those 3 companies are making it more complicated for the clients because it's trying to do many things at once, and it is expanding. They are expanding with limited resources. So that's a major key problem. However, it is possible that you are not going to be able to answer to the question, which is, what should they do of those 3 companies? Should they merge them? Should they have 2 instead of 3? Should they have 1? Should they create a new one? It's possible that you won't be able to specifically answer this question, but it's also important that you understand that you have to identify some opportunity that you report to the client and tell them that something that's very important that they should not miss. Maybe by trying to do too many things, they're having a hard time being good at any because they are sort of spreading themselves thin. Key problem, spreading yourself thin. If someone wrote this in the key problem, I think it would be very acceptable. I would say there's 25, 30% of the students groups that actually mentioned that. So, so far so good, but I was surprised to still see, so what would be the percentage? There was still something like 30% of the group, maybe not every opportunity, but that had at least one opportunity out of 4 or 5 that was not a fact, but it was actually what to do. So there are some groups, maybe 15%, that had essentially only the what to do inside the opportunities, and opportunities are not what you're going to do. The opportunities are just facts. So I've said this a long time. I'm used to still see that in the draft. I think it was a little bit better than average. I didn't see it as much. I think I was a little bit obnoxious this semester in trying to emphasize the fact that opportunities are not what you are going to do. But even though I was maybe obnoxious for some people because they heard it so many times, there were still a number of people that didn't hear it. So I think I mentioned that in class last week, and people were rolling their eyes as if it's possible to have missed that, but still a lot of people have missed it. So avoid telling what you're going to do in the opportunities. That's a big no-no. And just try to focus really on what are the trends that you see are happening, and try to, don't try, more than try, put some sources. That was not a big problem. There was maybe 10% of the people that once they had correct opportunities, they were stating facts. There was 10% that didn't have sources. So that was very good. I usually have a worst case scenario than that. So whoever talked about the opportunities, you were very good at putting sources, just do it systematically, which was not so much the case for the threats. For some reason, the threats had quite a large number of threats that did not have sources. So try to have sources for your threats. Now some little pointers. Don't try to use opportunities that are extremely obvious. You know, so extremely obvious. It's the fact.
Professor, I
Yes.
have a question.
Yes.
So during our rough draft, we were putting like quotations from like other like stats and stuff, you know, like what samples like mostly buying flowers and stuff and all that for what they could possibly do. So quotations are perfectly fine in the SWOT analysis because we were basing it off like the rough drafts that you have.
Yes. So you can have quotations. Be careful that they are not too long.
Right. But we would like abbreviate it with like the 3 dots and just cut them off. Just to give like the
exactly.
most important. Okay,
yes, awesome. Exactly like that is good. Like exactly like you said, you could have, you know, the bracket, then 3 dots, then the most important part, then 3 dots, and then you close the bracket, and that way we know that this is a direct quotation, and it looks even more powerful than just saying so and so and so and so as said by X 2022. By having the quotation, it adds weight to your argument. So that's a very good idea. You can do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure because I know that we're trying to look professional towards the client. We didn't know if like, you know, if that was like overstepping and like that was a little too casual to be, you know, just be like, oh, this came from this source, that type of stuff.
Well, ideally you would want to have both, because if every time you have quotation, it would look, you don't see this oftentimes in very rarely, never actually, in businesses where every time you will see quotations, that would look like a legal document, you know, try to refer what people are saying, and it will look very academic, very legal, if all you had was quotation. If you didn't have any quotation and all you had was the name of the source and the date of the source, that's sort of the most common. And if you had, in addition, sometimes when very appropriate, a quotation, still with having the name of the source and the date, I think it's just a way to emphasize and adding weight to the fact that this is really exactly what the source is saying, because you're using directly the word of the source, and therefore it just adds. You know, this report is sort of your argument. So the more you can make it strong, your argument, by using the best source and maybe having a quotation, the better. The thing is also you want this to look like business, so the shorter the better. There were some groups that had strengths, weaknesses, very short, like 4 words. 4 words for the strengths, 4 words for the weaknesses. That's too short. And there were some people that had a 5-6 line paragraph for every strength. That's too long. So not too many people did that, but there was maybe 5 out of 30 who had this issue. So it's often that people make this sort of mistake for the draft, and they have no intention to make that mistake when they actually do the paper. But still, I had to mention that, you know, this was either too short or too long, for the people with my feedbacks, not think that I was okay with it. So I just mentioned it. Normally, I know that people correct that, but just in case, I wanted to mention it. So what's the good balance? The good balance is 2 lines on half. And so I've said this a number of times, make sure that you have a title for each one of your sentences. So when I say you have a title, if someone says strength, networking, so that's a title, you know, networking, semicolon, and then the sentence. But you can't have just networking because it's not self-explanatory. Is it bad networking or good networking? So if it's in the strength, you're going to say good networking. But if you thought the networking was bad and you add it in the weaknesses, you don't put just networking, you have to put bad networking. So make sure that the short title is self-explanatory with an adjective. So I try to pick all the times, look very thoroughly in case you actually miss the adjective, and that short title could be used anywhere. And like networking, that could be used anywhere, but it had to be sort of qualified in order to be seen as being positive or negative or something that goes into the threats or whatever. So, and I've wrote it down. You're missing the title, make sure you have a title, and it's self-explanatory. And then if you want, bold the title, underline the title, so that way they really stick out. It's very important to do this, because when you make a report like that and you give this to people that are executives, they want to get the information right away. They don't want to be fishing for the information. So it's very important to give it to them already very organized and summarized as much as possible, so it saves times. In addition, is imagine that if you had to make a presentation of this, it would be very easy, because you pick just the title. You would have 6 bullet points for the strength. That would be your slide. The slide would have the title for the slide calling strengths, and then each bullet that would be just your title. So it would be pre-made. If you work for a big company and you do it that way, people are going to really like to work with you, because you will be very well organized and it will be pre-made. So I try to teach it this way, because that's what I see being used in the industry every day, 6 days a week. You know, the industry that I work are 6 days a week, because they are for-profit industries. And so it's almost 6 or 7 days a week sometimes. But anyway, that's the way people want to see it, quick and so forth. So make sure you have sources. Make sure that you have at the end 10 pages. So the people who did the full draft are actually checked, and they were careful to have 10 pages. So I don't see this all the time. There was a lot of people that were careful, and I could see, you know, I'm a little surprised, because sometimes I don't know what to expect. There's, you know, I don't know if people really care, but I think it is very important to care, and I see a lot of people who care. I had a good surprise that last week when we had class in the lecture hall, there was not a full class, but I don't know how many people were there, but maybe there was 100 people instead of 160, because so there was quite a large number of people missing. And, you know, I'm always concerned, what are they missing and so forth. And at the end of the class, there's 2 students that came to talk to me, and we had a really nice, interesting conversation. And they were telling me, don't worry, there's people that really care. And it's important for them to do well in this class, because they care to learn something that they can use. So there's all kinds of people that go to the university out there in this world. And so I was happy to see your draft, because I could sense that by reading the draft, that there were people that really cared. So the one thing that is difficult, that 50% of the draft made a mistake, and that's sort of the way it works, is when they go and talk about the strategies, you know, the 4, 5, 6 strategies that they want to suggest. There were quite a large number that did not really state strategy. They stated tactics. They stated ideas. So I made sure to underline that and to spot this, and to say, be careful, these are tactics. Make sure that you are providing the name of a strategy. So what are the strategies? Market penetration, product development, market development, diversification. There's about 15 strategies that I've provided you. And in fact, if you go in Canvas and you go and click on the file, and I'm doing it right now, and you click on tips, if you do this inside this section, let me do it at the same time, files, and then you click on tips, you should have a section that talks about opportunities and strategies. Yes, so it gives you a list of the basic strategies. Yeah, it gives you this. So let me share this with you very quick. Like I just said, I went to Canvas, and I click on tips, and it was the last file. It says opportunities and strategies. If you go in there, you will see that it gives you a list of the basic most common strategies. So here you have 4 plus 4 plus 3 plus 4. So what, about 14 or 15 strategies? So if you use any of these inside your recommended or suggested strategies, you will be okay because you're talking about strategies. The problem is a lot of time people are using IDs. For example, strategy is to use influencers. New Bloom solution should have an influencer that talk about their product. That's not a strategy, that's a tactic. It's a social media tactic. And social media, it's part of communication. And therefore, using an influencer is a small detail within a big element, something bigger. So the bigger element here may be market penetration. To do market penetration, we're going to use influencers. So you have to state the name of the strategies and you have to say why they should be doing market penetration and what would be an example of activities that they do is use influencers. So this idea of using influencers is not the main idea, is an example of activities that they would perform within the broader idea, which is the strategy. The broad idea is the strategy, the tiny detail is the tactic. So if you say, here's my first strategy, you don't say a tactic. Here's my first strategy, you say a strategy. That's not easy. And I know I teach master students that are in their 30s or 40s, and they make this mistake all the time. However, I think it's still important to try to understand it, and I teach it to all my students independently, if they're undergraduate or postgraduate, because it makes a big difference, because it's like a language. Business is a language. And if you're using the IDs for talking about strategies, you are therefore incorrect, and it's not good. You're just learning not the right way. Do you have any questions? So as a summary, and you can raise your hand if you have a question. As a summary is that you want to make sure that in your strategy suggestion section, the alternatives, you provide 4 or more strategies and not tactics. So, so that was what, 70% of the groups that made this mistake. So therefore you want to go back to your strategies and look inside if you actually mention the name strategy and then mention the exact strategy. I said that in the past to make it easier for you and more clear for everyone, for me included, is why don't you name the strategy, write it in red, and make it bold or if necessary, so that way it really pops. That would be what I recommend, because if it's, the more it's bold, the more it's clear, the better it is. Let's very quickly look at what I mean when we look at samples. Here's the sample that is inside Canvas since January. And you can see it says strategic option 3. It has a title, and then there is the name of the strategy in very explicit format because it's actually bold and underlined. So there's no misunderstanding about what is the strategy. I don't have to guess. If you remove this word from this, it really takes away the simple fact that you're stating what is the strategy. So I don't have to guess, it's written. And to make it explicit, maybe I should make my samples bold, underline, which like this, and red. And if I could, I would have a GIF that would actually make the word change and they will rotate or whatever. So it would be even more obnoxious that you have to state what is the strategy. If you don't state the strategy, how can I know what is the strategy? Then be careful, make sure you state the strategy and you don't state the tactic. So some people, they understood that this is important And so they wrote, my strategy is to use TikTok. Again, you know, that's not a strategy, that's a tactic. So make sure that you have the strategy and that the strategy stands out, sticks out, because it's bolded. You could even, I don't know, highlight it, like sort of put a yellow marker on it, just to be super clear that it has to be there. So whoever is working on this section, you want to have the strategy inside the strategy section. It seems pretty obvious, but that's a mistake that is very commonly made. Any specific question on that you may have? No. Okay, so I will continue with this. Then I think, you know, after the strategy, you talk about the strategy, make sure that you recommend what is the best strategies. So there was, you know, there's only 30% of the people that actually went to the extent of writing the strategy. And quite half of the people actually made some recommendation, but the other half did not make recommendations. So I don't know, I'm not sure that they know that they have to recommend which one is the best recommendation. So I go back to the sample. And if I go back to the sample, you will see that it says strategic option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, and there's pros and cons for each one of them. And then eventually there is the recommendation, the suggestion about which strategy to use. So you can't just list the strategies and say that there could be 4, 5, or 6 potential strategies, and then forget to tell us which one you're going to pick. You have to tell us, out of these 5 strategies, we recommend this. Otherwise, I have to guess which one is the one you're recommending, because you're not stating 4 potential strategies and are going to do all of them. Maybe there's some that are better, so you have to say it. So in that situation, you could say the best strategy is the 3rd, and here's why the 3rd is the best, and that's it. Or you could say the best strategy is the 4th. However, we're going to do the 4th first and the 1st second 6 months after. So you don't have to, you know, there's not one thing that fits every situation. So what it is that you could even recommend the 5 strategies by saying we're going to do 2 first, 1 second, 3rd, 4th, you know, and recommend them in the sequential order. Or you could say we're going to do the 1st and the 2nd strategy at the same time. We're going to combine these 2 strategies. And then a year after, we're going to do the 5th and the 4th together. Or the 5th first and 6 months after the 4th. So there's not a single way. There could be just one strategy you keep out of 4 or 5. There could be a combination that you do. There could be an order that you sequence them. It's all about making an explanation. So you have to have this recommendation after you talk about the strategies. Otherwise, it was not so useful to mention the strategy if you don't tell us the recommendation at the end that you have for these strategies. Does that make sense? I'm hoping it makes sense because, okay, great. I'm hoping it makes sense because like I said, there was 6 groups that did that inside the, maybe not 6, but 4 or 5 groups that did that naturally, but I don't know if the rest of the team are going to realize that. And that's sort of a big mistake, because if you have your final document and you've talked about strategies and we don't know what you recommend, it's going to take points away. So one thing I did to make it 100% transparent for you to see is I sent you the rubric as well. So with the rubric, and let's do this. Let's look at the rubric very quick. With the rubric, and I see there's someone that have their hand up. So please go ahead and ask your question as well.
Hello, Professor.
Hello.
Yes, I did have a question. It was actually about the rubric as well.
Oh.
As I was reviewing, I did not see anything mentioning about customer analysis, targeting strategy, and positioning. So I was wondering if you should include that in our
Yeah, you're right. It's crazy. It's missing there. Yeah, so something happened. You looked at it very you should get extra points for having picked up this missing.
I'm fine. Marketing. So we are team 9. Extra points. Thank you.
So excellent. The STP is missing. The STP. So for some reason, this has to be the percentage. Either it's missing, it's not adding to 100 or something, but there's STP that is missing. So I'm going to reorganize that and add the STP and email it to everyone with STP. The STP is not going to be a lot of points. And the reason I don't put a lot of points for it is because the students in general don't do it very well. And it's a very difficult, the most difficult thing in marketing is the P of positioning. So you have S, T, and P. And therefore, I'm also realistic to the fact that students are learning, that oftentimes this is one of their first consulting ever in their life. And oftentimes this is one of their first marketing class as well. And so STP is the most complex part of marketing. And it should get points, but it's not a lot of points, even though it should be worth a lot of points. So for my master's students, it's worth much more points because they have to perform very well with it. So I'm going to add it there, and I have to find why it's missing. It may be also something like 4 points or something like that, 4%. And that's the reason why it's low. So I did find, and I'm going to piggyback, and I believe this was Alexander. Was I correct?
Professor, yes. So I'm the one that spoke up, but one of our team members, actually the one that noticed it first. It was Nika. She noticed it first, but
oh, yeah. Okay, very good. Yeah. I know Nika.
Thank you. So, thank you for answering too.
Yes. And so the mistake, I'll tell you very quick what's the mistake that students are doing in hope that I can give you enough information that you can fix it for yourself. And it's a mistake that is honest mistake. It's like a beginner mistake. So the mistake students have made, the one that went all the way to the STP, but what I see afterwards, when the paper is finished and I have to grade it, and that's why I know not to give it a high point, because otherwise the grades, would be lower, and I don't want, that's not my purpose. My purpose is students learn. But so I'll tell you, the big issue is they think of segmentation and targeting as if it's like a boilerplate. And even in the industry, I see this mistake. So the boilerplate meaning like every time you have to divide people the same way. So we're going to divide them by gender, by age, by occupation, by social class, by zip code, and what else? Yeah, that's pretty much the most common one. And so they think segmentation is always using these no matter what, every project. And then they say that this is going to be a B2B. And for example, they're going to focus on florists. And there was quite a number of people actually that made this mistake, whoever went all the way to STP. So they say the florist is who we're going to try to do something special to, and I won't go into details because I thought that was a great idea. And then they say, how do we divide the florist? Well, we divide the florist by gender. So they say that if obviously, the somewhat two gender of florist. And then they say, but looking at florist, by their gender something that is very useful. And then say it's not useful. And then we're going to look at the florist by their age. And then eventually they just say, well, but looking at florists by their age doesn't make that much difference. And so then they use those boiler, you know, those stereotype type of criteria for dividing people, you know, like when you teach those criteria, these are the ones that you're going to use because they are the most simple. However, they are not very salient. They are not very relevant to the B2B florist that they're looking at. So then to do a good segmentation, and that's what's always very difficult, because targeting is not too difficult. Segmenting is extremely difficult, and positioning is even more difficult than segmenting. So why is segmenting difficult? Because there's so many ways to segment, and you cannot use too many characteristics of segmentation. You should use 4, maybe 5 characteristics of segmentation. So you have to make very sure that they are important. So if you think about a florist, maybe you're going to think about the geographical location. Maybe you're going to think about the sales, you know, the turnover, people that make 0 to 100, I don't know, a month, 0 to 25,000 a month. People that make 26,000 to 100,000 a month. So maybe the income or the number of customers that the florist has, the number of transactions that the florists do, may be more relevant than their gender. And so when you do segmentation, you don't want to use a boilerplate. You use a boilerplate to teach someone what segmentation, so that way they understand what it means. But then when you use it in real life, you want to stay away from the boilerplate, because then it's not as relevant to the market or to the product or to the customers that you're looking at. So that's what's very difficult, is what are the 4 characteristics which are relevant to my potential target? Oh, I see. Oh, you're right. So therefore I have to really think about my potential target and then think about the type of characteristics I would use in order to divide them, and then start selecting the target I would want to focus on. Yes, that's the way you go. It has to be realistic, and it has to be custom to who you're trying to segment, and not just use the sort of the standard characteristics, because they don't work. They may be, the standard may be working for selling ice cream, but they may not be working for selling flowers. So you have to think about it. And that's what the mistakes that many people are going to do. And so when you look at the sample, you will see in the sample that, you know, that's oftentimes done in a way that is not great either. But that's where you would want, I'm looking for the sample that I had. So in fact, in this sample, I have gender, ethnicity, household income, occupation, lifestyle. And it is possible that also students don't really understand this part. And what they do is they take the characteristics which I have in the sample, because I think now that I'm looking at this sample, I've seen a lot of people breaking it down exactly the same as the Ciceri crystal. This made sense for the Ciceri crystal, but it doesn't make sense for flowers. And so therefore, you know, for like a florist, a business that would sell flowers, it just doesn't make as much sense as selling crystal to individuals. So you have to be careful by looking at the sample that these may not apply, those specific characteristics may not apply for the project that we are working on, and pick the correct characteristics. So do the best you can on this part. Whoever does this is going to have to really think and read the paper and read what everybody else is doing. The most difficult piece, but which makes the paper the best, is when there is cohesion between what everyone says in the different parts. Oftentimes the problem is the different parts are broken between different students, and then each student is doing their thing, and not really paying attention to what the other people are doing. So that's why the strategies should be related to the opportunities. You know, so I'll give you one that you will understand, but I don't recommend you say that. But if you say that if you talk about strategy 2, one of the biggest problems is that people don't know the company and the brand. So it's very important to penetrate and to do market penetration as a strategy. And some of the activities will consist in using social media. And in order to boost the social media, we should invest in influencers. And then if, inside the opportunity section, you could have mentioned about the fact that some studies showed that using influencers increased sales by 20%. And according to so-and-so research 2021. And use this as the opportunity to mention this specific tactic inside the strategy section. But in the strategy section, you were clear in mentioning that the strategy is market penetration. And as an example, you will use this specific tactic, which is supported by the fact that influencers are an opportunity. So there is a connection between whoever wrote the opportunity and whoever wrote the strategy. And then at that time, if you say that the customer should be an older retired gentleman, you should have inside the segmenting characteristic age and retired or not retired, with being retired and older being the number, or maybe the age doesn't even matter. Maybe it's retired that matters the most. And retirement becomes one of the characteristics. But it's important that there's connections and logic between the different elements inside the documents, so we can see that it was almost like one brain that created this document. So it's logical and cohesive. The problem is when we can have this sense that it was written by different people, you know. And I'm not just saying sometimes the font is different. It's like you have like 5 fonts. It's because there were 5 different people with 5 different formats. That's obviously the most horrible. But sometimes it's all one font, but you can see there's different train of thoughts. It has to be one train of thoughts, and the whole document is sort of reinforcing this train of thoughts. There was probably 4 papers that were sort of finished, complete, that had all the sections. And that was sort of the biggest mistake, is making sure that everything is cohesive. And I'm after I read this paper, I am very clear about what is the opportunity, what is the strategy, why is this the best strategy, and somewhat in detail how it's going to be implemented at the end. Then at the end, it would be great if you mention some objectives. It doesn't have to be too many objectives, don't break a leg on it, but I would say 2 or 3 objectives, which might have to do with increasing the number of clients, increasing the sales, increasing the reputation. I think those 3 are probably the most obvious. When you say something needs to increase, you need to say, so increase by how much? 10%, 20%, double. And then you need to have a date in the next 12 months, in the next 18 months, in the next 6 months. You know, in the next 6 months, they need to recreate the website and launch the website. And that's it. So this one is clear. You have to have some objectives, because that also gives some real reality to this project, and it gives some kind of measuring sticks and control for the client by knowing what is urgent to do and when is it supposed to do, and so forth. Okay. So if I go very quickly to the paper, you have to write an introduction. Many people did that. It's followed by the key problems. I recommend to have about 3. They need to be high level. They need to be brief. You don't have to write a full thing. What I was saying about the strengths is that, and weaknesses, opportunity, and threats, is they need to have a bold, short title like this. And then a short sentence. Same thing for the weaknesses. Same thing for the opportunities. Make sure that you have sources for the opportunities. You could have sources for the strengths and weaknesses based on the interview, for example, or the feedback from the client, or maybe interviews that you may have had with some people when you showed what they do. And that could be the way you found weaknesses, is by asking people questions. You want to also rank this. And I had the feeling that it was ranked. For the most part, that didn't bother me, the sequence, from the most important to the least important. I found that this was most of the time how it looked. For the strengths and weaknesses, for the opportunities, I'm not 100% sure that this was the way you wanted everything to be ranked. I didn't pick too much on that, but eventually you will want to also rank your opportunities from the most important to the least important. So, when I talked about the opportunity, the fact that more sales are going up by 20% when you do social media and influencers, that opportunity generates a tactic. It doesn't generate a strategy. So that can be used as an example. So therefore, you would not expect this to be at the top. If you have 6, 7, 8 opportunities, I would imagine that this one be towards 6 or 7 or 8, not at the top of your opportunities. Same thing for the threats. You'll have in threat, it doesn't say competition. Although for threats, competition, that's sort of self-explanatory. But here it's even better. It says lots of competition. So it would not say environment, threat, environment. So no, environmental concern, ethical concern. So there's enough words that it's self-explanatory and it's self-sufficient. So after this follows the analysis of your strategies and the potential targets. And you start with the critical success factors. And here you could have 3, 4, 5, but at least 3. And here you'll have the, so what's interesting is when the key problems is what you see as being the main problem for the client currently. The critical success factors is what should you do? What should the business, the owner, have as the top in the list of things that are important to keep in mind, that are critical for its success? What are the factors that are critical for its success that needs to be kept in mind? If you think about it, there should be a connection between what you think is critical that he keeps in his mind and the key problem that you think he's facing. In fact, there's a question and answer between the key problem and sort of the critical success factors. That's why whoever write these two could be the same person, but if it's not the same person, they should look at what each other is writing and making sure there is a coherence between the two. It is said that these are high level. High level means that, again, they are broad. They are not too specific. Too specific, again, would be saying, they should have, they have a good amount of people following them on NBS, but very few people are following them on social media in AAF. And that's a critical success factors, is have more people follow A and F. Well, is it really what's critical here? What are the biggest problems? There may be bigger problems, there may be things that are more critical. So you have to really sort of distill this to what's the essence. Then follows the strategies, and I've already mentioned about this. And after the strategies is the recommended strategy. So that's very important. People miss that. Then you do the best you can, really picking up the segment characteristics, which are very much the one that makes sense, not the boilerplate, makes sense to your potential target. And there could be only 3. It's better that you have 3 that are correct, that you have try to have many characteristics that just are sort of too generic And then the target, you explain the method that you're going to use. So that's important. So the method is street, undifferentiated. You sell to everyone. Concentrated. Concentrated is that you actually combine a few targets together, the one that can be combined, the one that can sort of overlap. How many do you combine? 3, 4, 5. And then differentiated means that you have unique single targets are going to receive a single product. So it's a method. The literature called it a strategy, but I think it's confusing when you talk about the targeting strategy. It's more the targeting method. And then you have the positioning. And here it's a little bit like the segmenting. What you do with the positioning is you state 1, 2, or 3 attributes of positioning. 1 is good, 2, it's great, 3, it's good, because the more attributes you have, the more it's complicated to communicate 3 attributes. Communicating about 3 amazing skills is a lot of work. It's easier to communicate about 1 amazing skill. And it's more believable that a company has 1 amazing skill than a company has 3 amazing skills. By having more attributes or pledging or pretending to have more attributes, you make yourself look like you're not being honest and realistic. So 2 is sort of what I recommend most of the time. But sometimes what you can do, which is even better, is you recommend 6, but you select out of those 6, 2. So that way it shows that you have a big pool of numbers, but then you are going through them and you're saying which one are the best. So you don't want to say, so you want to say the description of the 6 and then the rationale behind the 2 best, and you say why, and these are the ones that you recommend. That would be the ultimate way to go about it, because there's a rational explanation. And then you can go into talking about ideas and tactics by making some recommendation for the strategy that you recommend. So you can start the sentence by saying, we are therefore concluding by saying that the best strategy we recommend is market development because blah, 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 so forth. To launch a market development, we want to focus on 5 main tactics. Tactic 1, this. Tactic 2, this. And then you can go in detail like that. And then after this, you can have a brief little presentation of your product mix, and then a very quick statement of your objectives, and you're done. But all of this has to be cohesive, okay? Excellent. Do you have any questions? All right, so if you don't have any questions, I will continue with the class. What you should do is meet with your group, review the feedbacks. Hopefully you've already started sharing these feedbacks between all the members. I didn't write the word strengths or weaknesses all the time, so I just wrote S for strengths and W for weaknesses and T for threats. So if you see the word T is okay or whatever, T is for threats and all that. So I think you will guess. Read the feedbacks, the whole thing. Don't stop on the first line. Read the whole thing and then discuss it with your team members, and it should be very clear. So I'm going back to the product mix, and I want to keep on going where I was last time. I was starting to talk about the concept of packaging. Packaging is very important because it's one of the elements that allows you to be competitive. You can differentiate yourself with packaging. The packaging is one way to differentiate yourself. The packaging is one way to protect the product. The packaging is one way to present the product. The product can be recognized by the packaging. It's a very important element that allows you to keep track of where is the product because it has a barcode or something like this. So here's an example of a packaging that became very successful. About 15, 20 years ago, started the movement for craft beer. And one of the things that was quite remarkable about craft beer is the fact that they changed the perception of beers by having less traditional presentation. One company that was quite remarkable in changing the presentation is Ballast Point. They came with very bright, very colorful, very exciting presentation that was very much going against the curve. So packaging is important. If you find like what Yoplait found is that people don't have the time to eat a yogurt because it's too many rituals, such as the way you open the yogurt, the fact that you need a spoon and so forth, the fact that you need to use your two hands and so forth. They discovered that people just wanted to drink the yogurt or to use some kind of tube in order to eat the yogurt. They also saw the difference between the different targets and saw that the kids were more inclined to eat the yogurt in a new way, and they were open-minded. It didn't put the product down. It didn't mean the product was not as good. So that was important. Pringles also with the tube brought a massive revolution. So it's very important, the packaging. Now I want to talk about something else, which is the brand. The brand is very important because that's an element that distinguishes your product as much as the packaging, much more than the packaging to some extent. It's maybe a reason why people would want to buy your product. It's not so much for the benefits or what the product performance and attributes, but because of what they think of the brand. Consumers may buy more than the product, they might be buying the brand. And sometimes you can see that there are products that do look alike. And the biggest difference is not so much what the appearance of the product, but the brand behind the product. So I've shown you different examples of different designs of cars, and they do look alike a lot, but they are different brands. Here's a Rolls-Royce versus a Geely. And to me, there's a big similarity between, at least looking at it quickly like this, between a Geely and a Rolls-Royce. And obviously, one may question the patent and trademark and copyright issue behind all of this, but that's their matters, not ours. But as a consumer, we could say, gee, these are very similar products. But if you ask someone, would you want a Geely or would you want a Rolls-Royce? I'm pretty sure we all guess which brand would people rather have, which the Geely may be as good as a car, but the brand doesn't say as much. So brands are very important. Brands are everywhere. Brands allows consumers to see and differentiate because it's a name, a term, a sign, a symbol, or design, or the combination of these that allows to differentiate and identify the product. Because there's a brand, there's the assumption that the product is a higher quality. It's assumption that you have less risks. It makes your decision much easier because you're getting a brand, you're getting some kind of warranty that there's some worth for this product. So the brand helps to protect the company because it can be protected. It helps also because it creates consumer loyalty. People buy the brand and they keep buying the brand for whatever the next thing the brand is producing. Maybe it's producing a new model, maybe it's producing accessories, and therefore it allows you to have a competitive advantage. So branding is therefore the process of giving a product some value, some power. So brand contact is the fact that you can have communication about the brand, not just by using advertising or social media, but there's many types of displaying the brand. It could be a banner, it could be a uniform, it could be a wrap on a vehicle. All of these are building brands. Brands are associated with the positioning, and therefore they are associated with the meaning of the brand. So what's the positioning? It's the meaning of the brand, the identity of the brand. The more attributes of positioning you have, the less people remember what your brand is about. That's why I said this just earlier, is you don't want to have too many attributes. You want to have very specific attributes for what the brand can be and what your consumers want your brand to have. So it has to be STP versus PS PST. Oftentimes, small businesses, they think in terms of what should we be, and let's become what we want to be, and let's hope that there's a customer that cares for what we want to be. The reality is it should be what do the customer want, and that's what we're going to be. That way you're more likely to be successful because you're giving people what people want. So Volvo is safety, BMW driving, Mercedes engineering. It's important to see that around the brand, there's all kinds of different semantic meaning. So semantic meaning is like symbols. Maybe the location where the product is made, there's history, there's all of these different things. So the brand is measured by what's called brand equity. The brand equity is the difference between a product that has no brand and a product that has a brand. If it has a brand, it has equity. So if you say pet food does not have a brand, therefore has no equity. But if it's pet smart clothing, for example, therefore there's the branding of the fact that it's called pet smart. If you think about a brand that is very famous due to its packaging, you could think about Coca-Cola. If you think of a brand that is very famous for its taste, you could think of Häagen-Dazs. If you think a brand because of its design, you could think of Apple. If you think of a brand very famous for its service, you could think about American Express. If you think of a brand very famous for its quality, you could think of Gillette Sensor Excel. So brands, they evolve with the time. They have to adjust their meaning with the time. So you don't change your meaning every year. You change it as the world around you is changing and your target is changing. Even the logo, the slogan, all of this has to change with time because sometimes it's due to to some changes of your infrastructure. Maybe your brand is merging and therefore you accommodate these changes, but there may be some kind of fashion element. So what's brand equity? Brand equity is made of 4 elements, and those elements are incremental. The basic element of brand equity is brand awareness. Do the consumer know the brand? They know the brand, they don't know the brand. They know the brand when you tell them a product category. So you say mineral water, and then they tell you Arrowhead. That's a knowledge that is better than if you say, of this list of mineral water, which one do you know? That's a lower level of brand awareness, but it's still brand awareness. Brand association is once they know about a brand, what are the keywords, the meaning that come? What is the story that comes with this brand? Brand quality is like a spectrum from low quality to high quality, and every brand is perceived by the consumer within this spectrum. And then brand loyalty is how much have they bought, how much are they willing to buy again, how much do they tell their friends about this brand and communicate and generate word of mouth for the brand. It is very, very important. Brand loyalty helps you selling the next generation of products. It helps you if you make a mistake, people have loyalty, and therefore they forgive you much better. And it also gives the brand superior power when it comes to dealing with the channel of distribution. The distributors like to sell brands that are famous, and brands that are famous are the ones with the best brand loyalty. Brand that people know is great. Brand that people rave about, that's even better. So the distributors, they really like these. If you sell to a distributor and you're not so famous brand, you better have a high margin for them, because that's why they will carry you, is people don't look for this brand, but there's a high margin. Now, people look for that brand, I will accept a lower margin because people will come to the store. So it's going to increase traffic to the store or the online store or whatever. And it's going to increase sales volume, but maybe I would accept a lower margin. So that's how you deal with the trade, is you show your brand loyalty and you also show the contribution that you're providing for the distributors. So there are many types of brands. There are brands that are licensed, which means that you don't manufacture, you just own the brand, someone else is manufacturing, and you're making money from the distribution of that brand and the ownership of that brand. But there's also the issue that you may be the manufacturer, and therefore you have to think about what you're manufacturing. Should you have the same brand as the manufacturer for selling the product, or should you have different type of brands associated for the brand? I was reading this morning that Porsche is working on a prototype of a new car, a new Porsche that's going to be a pickup Porsche. So a pickup Porsche, that's kind of very strange. At least it's very strange to me. And I'm wondering to some extent if they should not be creating a separate brand for making pickup Porsche. Maybe that's too far. They've already made sedan and SUVs and electric cars. To what extent extending the brand into making pickup is not going to sort of spoil the sort of the sportiness of the coupe and of the brand. There could be some level of dilution, and it's sort of dangerous to overextend your brand in multiple categories like this. So I know this because I belong to the US Porsche Club, and this was someone that went to Stuttgart last month, and they were writing a little article to inside the newsletter, and saying that they were working inside the factory, and for some reason they ended up in the wrong place, and they actually saw that pickup Porsche prototype somewhere. So I'm like, whoa, what is going on? And they were also quite astonished. And I'm thinking maybe that's not a good idea to have a pickup Porsche. But it all depends. There may be people that think it's a great idea, but they are not the target. And therefore, they think it's a great idea, but they're never going to buy the car. But the people who would be buying the cars and all the kind of cars may have a different idea. So it's, when you are measuring people perception, it's irrelevant to measure everyone's perception. It matters more the people that have a say, the actual buyer of the product, that have an impact on the consumption of the brand. They have a say. So some brands have been successful at creating sub-brands. So talking about cars, there's Lexus, that is a new brand for Toyota, and they didn't want to create the same brand. So they had to differentiate themselves for the benefit. So in that situation, it was different because they were not, by creating Lexus, they were not hurting Toyota. It was just whatever special car that they were making could not be used using the name Toyota. So it was not hurting them. It was not just working. So they had to create a new name in order to make it work. In the situation of Porsche, I think by creating this new product, it may be hurting their brand. So then that's the decision, maybe to create a sub-brand for more of those four-wheel drive or outdoorsy adventure vehicle or whatever, or the category that they may call this SKU. So when you are developing brand, you have to think about the issues of the brands that generates better reputation, the brands that are making more sales volume, the brands that are creating the most profit, and then also the brands which are called flankers, which are essentially trying to gain market share. So sometimes what you do is you create more and more brands, multiple brands. So this is pretty famous in the detergent category, where they would have one product detergent, which has the same attributes and quality of being a detergent, but they would have multiple brands in order to compete against themselves, but increase the market share that they would have if you add all of these brands. So if they say, oh, let's have one brand, with one brand, hey, we're lucky if we get 20%. What if we take that one brand and then we multiply it and we create 6, 7, 8 brands? Are we going to get, is it going to be easier to be over 20%? In that situation, if it's true, it may be worth to create multiple brands. By creating multiple brands, you get more market share, but by creating multiple brands, you also get more targets, because each brand may have a specific positioning that is slightly different, that is more meaningful to a specific target. So brands have a personality, and therefore they're like people. And there's a connection between the personality of the brand and the people who buy them. Now there are sub-strategies of the product mix, and one of the sub-strategy is branding, and branding is broken down into 5 sub-strategies. There's a strategy is called line extension, is when you sell the same product with the same brand. So you're just creating different variation of this product, but you keep using the same brand. So it's called Danone yogurt, vanilla, Danone yogurt, strawberry, and you keep using Danone yogurt. But there could be brand extension. So it's like you're still using the same brand, but you selling it into a new product category. So it's like Barbie dolls, Barbie electronics. You still use the name Barbie because that's very important, and it's sort of can be connected. There's still a connection. Multi-brands, that's what I was talking about, is when you have the same product, but you're making multiple brands in order to gain market share or to focus on specific target. And then you have new brands when you will have a totally different brand with a totally different name in order to go after specific customers, increase your market share and so forth. And then the 5th strategy of branding, it's called co-branding, when you will be selling the product with a brand associated with. So this co-branding is to help the products to be sold. So when they created the concept of Intel Inside, was to help the computer companies to sell their computers by showing that the processor, which was a famous processor, is actually being used inside the computer. So as a recap, there is a product is a generic term for all the different type of products, from goods and services and so forth. Services have specific characteristics. There's 3 levels of products. There's the core, the actual, the augmented. There's 4 classification of products. There's convenience shopping, specialty, and unsought. There is the product mix decision in terms of product line and the concept of stretching upward and downward, and the concept of the width versus the depth and the length, which is the total number of products. And then thinking of in terms of brands, you have to understand the concept of brand equity and what is brand equity, the difference between the branded goods versus non-branded goods, and the different elements of brand equity, which is awareness, association, quality, and loyalty. And then think when you're developing a new brand about the fact that you have to think about what should this brand be? Should it be a new brand? Should it be the brand of the manufacturer? Should it be the distributor brand? And then you have 5 brand potential sub-strategies. You have line extension, brand extension, multi-brands, new brands, and co-branding. Do you have any questions? I am pretty much done with the product mix. The next subject I will talk about is new product development. New product development is the only strategy that we will talk separately. So there's about 15 strategies, but there's one that we will talk separately, which is this one. Why is this one so important? Because you don't exist as a business if you don't keep innovating. The world changes, the consumers changes, you have new competitors that enter the market, and therefore they make it more difficult for you to survive. So you have to constantly innovate, which means that you have to constantly come up with new products. A big bias of a marketer is to create new products and feel like it's necessary to constantly create new products. It's required, but it's not necessary to constantly do that. So you do this because you're responding to the need of growth. Growth is, this table is very important. Growth is the fact that you're going to have products that succeed, you're going to have products that fail, and you're going to have what's called the product life cycle. The product life cycle means that there's different cycles in which your product is going to go through, and it's going to evolve within these cycles, from the cycle of introduction, the cycle of growth, the cycle of maturity, and the cycle of decline. So what you do is you look at those different P products. Product 1 is being launched. Maybe product 1 is, you're lucky, your first product is amazing, and it's going to go through the introduction, the growth, and it's going to stay a long time in maturity and generate a lot of profit for a long time, and your competitors are going to try to copy you and so forth. But most of the time is you have to have several products being launched at the same time in order to have one that succeeds and carries the company for years. And you're going to have replacement products to replace this product that eventually will be in a position of decline. So you have P1, P2. So in a rational way, in a simplistic way, is when do you launch P2? Well, you launch P2 when P2 is in the growth stage, the second stage. When do you launch P3? Well, you launch P3 when P2 is in the second stage. The idea behind this is you want to have products in every one of the stages in order to be a company that is balanced. You have one old product, you have one new product, and you have one product that is in maturity. And so that keeps you stable, because if you only have old products, your company is going to not make as much money because the old product don't generate as much profit. And then you must have the profit of your mature product being injected to create a new product. So you know, and sometimes businesses fail like this is because they haven't anticipated that large number of their products will be going through phases very fast, and therefore they haven't had the time spent creating new products. So that's why you will want someone responsible for the mature product, for the growth product, from the launching product, from the introduction and all this. So that way you have constant introduction of new products. This is why the new product development strategy is being discussed separately, and we will continue next week. Do you have any questions? So my recommendation before you all go is to speak with each other, have a meeting, and plan on seeing me or my assistant in the next 2 weeks. And if you don't have any questions, I see there was a question in the chat which says these slides were not on Canvas. Yes, these slides are on Canvas. If you go to product mix, you will see the slides in Canvas. I will also, I've recorded this, so I will save this and also put it available for everyone to go back at it again. All right, I wish you a good evening, and don't wait to go back working on this, because otherwise the time is going to go fast. It's due the first week of May, so that's in exactly a month. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.